Good evening, everyone. Um, I did say I was going to do these videos once a week. Uh, I have been doing them more like 2 times a week at the moment. I don't know how long that will last. It may be that I go back to the once a week thing. Also, I wasn't intending on talking about these topics for quite a while. And hopefully I was hoping to think that I wasn't actually going to talk about these topics. So I will treat them with respect and caution, as why I put content warning in the title. But I won't be talking in details. I'll be more trying to talk with a positive outlook and talk about my experience of how I overcome, how I got past these things and the damage that was caused. So first, I'll start with the I'll start with my current situation. I haven't been formally diagnosed yet, and that's mainly because the cost is prohibitive. It's would I don't have the money to actually do this, and I am working towards getting the money to do this, and also finding the right psychiatrist that will do it. Complex trauma is not in the DSM-5 yet, from what I understand. It's in the other book, so you can get formal diagnosis, but all the psychiatrists I've been looking for, I haven't found one that specializes in trauma in my local area. So it's something that I'm working on. There is no denial that this is what I have. I have suffered multiple types of both extreme experiences that were short term, and then there were prolonged instances where they lasted for several years. So that's why, for me, it's undeniable. Not only that, it's also the effect that it's had on me. And so to talk about that, as far as, can you make a self-diagnosis? Absolutely, you can. For You only have to look at the list of things, and it's straightforward that that's what I'm suffering. And I like to think that I'm going to heal from this, and I'm making a lot of progress. I've made a lot of progress in the last 6 months, especially from where I was. The most difficult aspect is that it has affected my whole life, essentially. So it was affecting me while I was a child, while I was going through these things, and then as I was going through adolescence, and then as an adult. So what I'm going to talk about today is probably focusing in on what happened to me from late teens into to now. So I I did self-medicate for a long time, and that was mainly alcohol and cannabis. um, for a long time there was moderate use, and then at some periods there were heavy use. So I did become alcoholic for quite a time. Um, I've been able to manage it most of the time. So I would get stuck for 6 months or a year where I was drinking a lot, and then I would tell myself I need to stop. So I would reduce the amount, and then I would get clean, and I would stay sober for periods of time. And there's been long periods of time where I've been able to enjoy the odd drink of alcohol, and the same with cannabis. I'd be able to have the odd joint from time to time and not have it as a habit. But self medicating from this was what I was doing to try and basically shut out my memories and experiences. So I I was also able to function. So as I guess that form of self medication, it was a combination of alleviating the stress and pain, and then also giving me space and time to actually function. And I was highly functioning for many years because of this. Um, but I would look at things like um, self medicating with alcohol and cannabis as forms of self harm, especially when it goes from being something that's beneficial to something that's actually um, bad for you. So at times when I would increase the amount of intake, it would actually exacerbate my condition rather than alleviate the condition. Um, and unfortunately, during those times, I was still able to function, but it it took a long time for me to be able to moderate that consumption of alcohol and cannabis. So um, so through my adult life, on and off, I've been going through cycles of um, using and not using, um, and these things would give me clarity when I would be clean and sober for 6, 12 months at a time, and then um, the stress would build up, and then I'd have to alleviate the pain through these methods. Um, it wasn't an, I mean, for me, I really wish that I'd found out about all this stuff earlier of how I can heal from this, and I would have probably been sober for a lot longer. So part of my um, part of my pain that's associated with all the lost time in my life is to do with how much time I had spent self-medicating. So I really do wish that I was able to uh, find these techniques and methods to go through the healing process earlier. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So I just have to move forward from now, and be thankful that I'm in a position now where I I don't have these substance abuse problems now that I used to. Um, I do think that, you know, a, a small amount of recreational use can be relaxing, but it very quickly becomes detrimental and it's dangerous. So you can actually push yourself over the edge. Luckily, I never went anywhere near hard drugs, so I never had the problem of that. Um, but you could argue that it doesn't really matter what the substance is because they're all causing a certain degree of harm. So I think that as far as like part of the well, I think you can be working on the healing process whilst um, still be using. I don't think it's going to actually work as fast, and it's not going to be as powerful for you. So I think being sober off whatever it is going to help you a lot. And I know that when I've done this, it's benefited me so much, and it's made me stronger. And I wouldn't say that it's allowed me to deal with more or cope with the stress more. Um, being sober, um, I think until I started really focusing on mindfulness and self reflection and going through a forgiving process and trying to go through this healing process on my own. Until I did that, I was lost. And it's sort of the the time that was lost can never be I can never get back the time that I've lost. Um, but what I can do is I can look back at my life and I can actually look at things that I've achieved and I can look at the mistakes I've made and I can have regrets and I can move past all that. Um, but what I can do is I can actually look at what I've done throughout my life, and at least I made attempts to persevere. And I kept the problem was I kept everything inside for so long that it was eating me up inside, and it was um, perpetuating the need to dull the pain. And it's so easy to actually do that with alcohol and um, things like cannabis. Um, but again, both of those things they can actually cause a lot of harm. So I classify that stuff as self harm as soon as you go past a few drinks, as soon as you go past a joint a month or something like that, then you're starting to escalate your habit. And from what I've been learning about addiction is that there's various levels, and once you increase the levels or once you go up levels, you're making it more difficult for yourself and you're actually causing more harm. So if you can keep yourself at a lower level before you become sober completely, then that's great, because what you're doing is you're managing it and you're not getting to that point where you're um, causing a lot of damage. It's amazing how much damage that can be caused from just a small amount of usage. And I am very lucky that I never went anywhere near hard drugs. So um, that helped me. Um, it's helping me now. But that's not to say if that's something that is listening to this has gone through themselves and they've been a user of hard drugs, they can become sober and they can repair the damage that's caused. So but what happened to me was is that um, I was high functioning and using alcohol and cannabis to get through the week and to work hard and maintain jobs and shut out the pain. So it enabled me to function, but it was preventing my healing because I was always pushing everything aside. Um, w- when I when I sort of got to a point in my life where I was wanting to actually, I've gone through several times in my life, adult life, where I've gone, I need to I need to start my life again. I need to grow. I need to rebuild. I need to learn a new skill so that I can actually get a new career. It's like I'm trying to invent my way out of the mess I'm in, but I was never actually trying to fix the problems that were there. Um, I was acknowledging them, but I wasn't actually doing anything about them. And I was keeping them inside because they're the sort of things that are too painful. And when I realized that I had to stop, I looked at my problems and then I thought, um, it's these things that are helping me get through the day, like having a few beers at night or whatever. They were holding me back, but I was still not acknowledging that what I really needed to do was work on the underlying causes, and I couldn't talk about them with people, and so it was like my own personal hell. And when I was in stressful situations with life, I found that I would actually consume more alcohol or smoke more. And when I did that, I was still able to function, but it made it even harder for me to actually do anything about my situation. And that continued on for long periods. And luckily, I have an ability to manage these things. So over my whole adult life, where I've used alcohol and cannabis, like I was saying earlier, I would be able to moderate it for long periods of time. So I'd be able to get sober and stay sober, but it wouldn't last for more than a year. Like it was the year and a half was the longest I think I went. Um, and then I would start off having small amounts, and then that would actually become more regular and it would increase in the amount. And then it would get to the point where I was using alcohol and cannabis almost daily at some periods. And again, I was able to function, but it was doing no good for me. And I was recognizing this, but I wasn't actually doing the things that I to do, which I again, I wish I was able to get onto all of these techniques earlier. Where I'm at now is I'm reading and listening to as much as I can, and I'm getting a lot of benefit from learning how things work and how you can actually heal. And there's a lot of success stories out there for people who have been through horrible things and they've destroyed their life, and for some reason they're able to go through that, but also be proactive about how to find a new way. And that's why it's great that there is literature out there, and there are support networks, and there are organizations that specialize in healing from trauma. So I think the world is really getting more aware and informed, and that's what's encouraging me to actually go on this journey myself, where I've gotten to this point and I want to document how I'm progressing, because for me I have gone through some really difficult times in my adult life, all because I didn't have the support at the right time. And there's more support out there now than there ever has been for this. And I like to hope that, I hope that um, that continues, and that everyone can benefit from that. So, I've just started reading a new book about healing from trauma, complex trauma, and just that I've got shivers right now from the stuff I was reading today, because I can feel it in my body. My body's telling me that um, it's life changing, it's profound. So there are ways. Unfortunately, substance abuse is probably one of the most common results of self medication, because you start off with a certain amount and then it becomes more regular, or you increase the amount and it becomes detrimental. So the next phase that I went through was, I went from what I call mild self harm, which is substance abuse, which is where the self medication is actually gone from being somewhat beneficial or allowing you to function at a high level, which is not sustainable forever. And then I got to the point where I was drinking heavily, and I started hurting myself physically, and it's not nice. I'm not proud of it. I wish I never went through that, but I learned to forgive myself. I had to forgive myself before I actually stopped doing it. So my experience was that I was aware of what I was doing, I was very conscious and deliberate, and it was a way that I was able to look at the pain I was going through, and I was inflicting the same pain on myself. And this is something I don't like talking about, and I don't want to talk in details. So it's very hard for me to talk about it without actually explaining details. But I think, on a general, as a subject, there's so many ways that people can self harm, and that's why I sort of started with the substance abuse. That even having a few beers every day, it's self harm if it's not doing you any good. It might not necessarily be bad for your body if you're drinking within the regulated guidelines, but if you're not doing it for the right reasons, then it's still self harm. I had escalated my habit to the point where um, I was drinking and smoking a lot, and then that's when I had my times where I was taking it to the next level, where I was actually physically and consciously hurting myself. And when I was in those times, were actually also some of the most stressful times in my life. So it's almost like the external forces and factors were actually contributing to me wanting to do this. And I had to forgive myself for doing this. So until I could stop, and I'm very lucky that in those periods of my life, I was able to do it. A lot of people don't get to stop, and a lot of people actually, when they do self harm, they really hurt themselves really badly. So they end up with scars, for instance, physical, literal scars. And um, again, I'm not going to talk in any detail about um, my own the hurt I did to myself. I'm not going to talk about it in a detail, but I'm going to try and try and explain what it was like for me to actually heal from it. And the main point, which I was talking about earlier, is that I had to forgive myself first. And before, this is something that happened before the forgiveness, is I was aware, and I didn't even think about reaching out to get help. And um, it was just something I was doing periodically. It wasn't every day. It was just, but there were periods in my life where it built up, and then it started happening, and then it started increasing, and then I became worried, but I couldn't stop doing it. And this was all the whole time I was working, and all that sort of stuff. Like, it didn't stop me living. It was something that was happening while I was doing everything else. So I identified what was happening, and I became fearful, but it wasn't enough for me to stop. And I wasn't at the point ready to forgive myself. I didn't even know that that's what you had to do. Um, and I'm just fortunate that I didn't I didn't do permanent damage in these situations. But the goal was, and this is the saddest thing, and this is heavy topics to be talking about, but um, you literally are deliberately wanting to hurt yourself, and you're going through the act of that, which is um, there's no rational reason to be doing any of these things. And one of the one of the most unfortunate aspects to this is that if multiple one or multiple people have hurt you, and then you then go on to hurt yourself because of the pain that you're going through, because of you, you can't deal with the memories and flashbacks and how it's affecting you. What you're doing is you're you're hurting your it's not going to stop the pain, and it's not going to stop the fact that you've been hurt. And really, it's almost like you're doing the bidding of the aggressor or the attacker. You're perpetuating what happened to you. And I don't think that it's because you become I don't think it becomes like a habit or an addiction again itself. It's like it's a way to try and resolve things, and it's not resolving things because it's actually making it worse. And in a way, you're perpetuating the hurt. And so for me, it occurred um, over maybe a 10-year period. Was the most It was mainly over a 10-year period, and it was sporadic. So I it wasn't the whole time at all. It was just at times over that period. And um, I I don't know exactly how many times in that period. I don't because I don't like to think about it too much, but um, we'll say every couple of years things bubbled up and became unbearable, and so this habit started to reemerge. And with self harm, it's something that you do and you don't tell people. Um, it with alcoholism and drug use, like obviously people around you will know, and you'll often be open about it, especially if it's base level socially accepted drugs as well. You're not keeping it a secret or anything, but um, the self harm becomes like a secret that you keep, and when things get too stressful, it emerges, and then you do it. So for me, once I realized I had to stop this and I was still functioning, I would look at my life and I would say, I need to stop this, but I didn't know how to stop it because it would just happen. And like I said, it was sporadic and it was over a long period. So it wouldn't happen for years, and then suddenly it'd start up again. So because I was defiling myself in the sense that I was hurting myself and I was harming myself, I had to forgive myself for what I was doing. And I had to actually say to myself, it's okay, you can stop now. You don't need to do this to yourself anymore. I basically became clear of that for another, like, 5 years after I'd stopped, was when my complex trauma overtook me. Um, what happened to me was pretty unique, and it's something that, for me, it's what I lived through, but it's something that I can never um, reconcile. And but what happened was is that I assumed that I'd been reintroduced or connected to people that had harmed me when I was adults that had harmed me when I was a child. So I had two instances when I was young child and growing up, and adults had harmed me, and they weren't from my family. They were not connected. They were, but they were. This is something about this is something that happened, and I can't really go into any more detail, but I I could not deal with it, and it drove me back into alcoholism, because these are so. Let's just be clear here that there's no way that I can prove that these were the same two people. Um, and this happened over a couple of years, and it only happened because I don't know. So from my experience, from my perspective, is that when I had met these people, that I knew that they were the people, and this happened separately over a couple of year period, and I did not know how to deal with it. I it's actually causing me to um, have troubles talking at the moment. But essentially, I felt like I'd been reconnected with, and there was a 30+ year gap between this situation. So this is going back to early childhood. So for one thing, um, my memories are very clear, but um, I could never prove that they were the same people. So I have to actually tell myself now that, the chances that they were the same two people that I happen to be reintroduced or reconnected to, um, somewhat accidentally, over a couple of years period in recent times. This happened recently. Um, I have I have to basically resolve the fact that I have to say to myself that they weren't the same two people. That how can I prove that they were the same people? Um, but what it did was is it re-traumatized me. It brought me back exactly to the it reinvigorated my flashbacks, and it made it extremely difficult for me to actually function. So I started drinking more again, sort of thing. I went from barely drinking to and drinking a healthy amount, just socially, but not daily, or just regular amount. And then when this started happening, um, I could not deal with it, and I, um, I had to keep working through this period. I couldn't stop what I was doing, and I started to basically drink, and I did start smoking a little bit more than I had been, but it was mostly the alcohol. It really pushed me to drink a lot of alcohol. So I have to basically look at this and go, and this has happened every day. I was like, I can't believe this is happening to me. And I lived with that. And I can never prove that these were the same people. And I have to actually say to myself that I have, I was, I have to acknowledge that I may have been delusional, that these weren't the people. So I became re traumatized because there's something that came back to me in adult life. And I still grapple with that because I know that um, there's a chance that it was, and that my fears were real, but my fears were real because it did get to me. So even if I had perceived that they were the same person because it was such a long time ago, to me, it was as if it was them. So it didn't matter. Like, I still lived through that, and I, by being re-traumatized in this situation, meant that I was basically, for about a year and a half or 2 years, I was in a constant state of um, extreme. I was frightened. I was agitated. I was constantly. Um, it's it's like my adrenaline was constantly running through my body. So I resolved actually to do something about one of the cases because it was something that happened to me, um, that happened in a place where I thought that the it happened at an institution where I thought that they would then have known about this thing somehow, and I had to resolve that maybe they never even knew that this event ever occurred, and most likely that's probably what happened. That the institution itself never knew that this thing ever happened. But I got the courage to actually go to the police and take it to the point where I was wanting to actually put a complaint in, maybe um, see if there could be some form of justice to this situation. When I did that, I became very paranoid. Um, and this happened to me over um, about a 6 month period. I went from I went from being like I told people about it. I knew. I told family and friends, and I went to the police and made a statement, and that's when I started um, becoming extra. I became paranoid, and um, I started thinking that the institution that was responsible was somehow um, knew that I was putting in a complaint, and uh, I started thinking that they were watching me and that sort of thing. So basic sort of paranoia. Um, I I actually then contacted the police and then withdrew my complaint, because it was causing me too much harm. I didn't know how to deal with this new, like, I'd just gone through a year and a half of um, being agitated and extremely trauma. Like, I'd been re-traumatized, and I'd gone through that initial period of a year and a half, roughly, and then once after I'd gone to the police, and I'd actually had some healing by actually confiding in people what I'd been through. So I did feel like I'd healed a certain amount from this, and then the paranoia kicked in, and then I was dealing with the fact that I'd been re-traumatized and had the last year and a half been extremely difficult, and then the previous 6 months going through paranoia. I then was in a like a manic state, like mania or manic depression, which is like I was not manic in the sense that I was running around um, or acting like manic, but my life became increasingly disrupted and singular. So what happened was, is I was to deal with what I was going through. I was I had insomnia, and um, I was actually drinking less and smoking much less than I had been. But I had insomnia, and the only thing that was keeping me going was I was actually focusing on making art. So that was my sort of lucky thing that I was able to do. So I was channeling my energy into making music, um, and I was also doing a lot of self care at the time. So I was able to bring down the level of the level of mania, I guess, that I was in. That um, bring it to a safe level, and so I was nurturing myself as well as I was doing creative things. It was my way of like shutting it out, but it spiraled, and again, all of this goes back to things that had happened when I was a child that were never dealt with, and then they came back to me at a much later date as an adult, and I wasn't able to deal with it. And I can never be sure whether my experiences were, for instance, I can never be sure that these were the same people, and I have to tell myself that. And that people will look at this story and they'll go, "Oh, well, there's no way that they were the same people." But the thing is that this happened in a small geographical area, and the people that I'd reconnected with, which I thought I were the same people, much later was in the same geographical area. So some of the chances of it actually being that they were the same people could be that. But again, I have to just say to myself that the chances of it being the same person, because people change, like over 30 years they look completely different unless you have their full name. I was too young to actually know these people's names, so there's no way I could ever prove this stuff. So um, it it destroyed me. It put me into a really bad place. I was re-traumatized on top of being traumatized. So it was and I'd already gone through. Um, this is long after the years of dealing with self harm and actually forgiving myself and moving past it. Then this happened, and so I was I was worn out. I had adrenal fatigue and all that sort of stuff. Um, I'm gonna have to break here, and I'll come back in like 30 seconds. But I just got to make a toilet break. But this is something too important to keep. I have to keep this stream going, so just bear with me. So I'd gone through all this stuff for so long, and the reason why I'm talking about all this stuff is because this is exactly what happens when you have unresolved complex trauma. Substance abuse, self harm, self sabotage, and it resulted in me. This situation, um, it was so much for me to try and grasp, because I couldn't deal with it, and I wasn't doing. I was doing self care, and I was making art as a way of not um, not focusing on what was going on. But what was happening was, is um, I I got to the point where um, it became dangerous for me. So I had insomnia, and I I basically made an attempt on my own life, and that's in the content warning of this video, is that, and I am ashamed of that situation, but I do understand I was very stressed to get to that point. So it got to the point after this was now a couple of years from first getting stuck in this situation to ending up at my worst time in my entire life. And that is where I made an attempt, And on halfway through it, I managed to stop myself. And what stopped me from it was just the it wasn't necessarily the guilt or shame, but it was the fact that I couldn't do this to people around me because I would have been leaving them. And I still didn't have the optimism for my own life. So I the only thing that really saved me that night was that. So I was able to stop. Um, and then maybe half an hour, an hour afterwards, when I'd returned home, I something something happened to me, and um, I made a second attempt, basically. And this second attempt was actually much more. I couldn't pull out of it, and I'm very lucky that I'm very lucky that how I attempted this, it didn't actually happen. So I'd gone from attempting to end my own life to realizing I couldn't do this and stopping and pulling back, and then um, returning home, and then I got triggered, and then I made it a second attempt, which was damaging. It was I did injure myself in the process, but I very luckily survived that, and I did a lot of damage in the process. Um, Essentially, I crashed my car hoping to die, and um, that didn't happen. And I'm very lucky that that didn't happen. And uh, I I can't reconcile what I did. I have to forgive myself for that, and I sort of have. And this is just like what I was talking about earlier with self harm, like where if you hurt yourself because you can't deal with the fact that you were hurt by others previously, and you're doing it for that reason. For some reason, you're hurting yourself because you can't reconcile what you've been through. It doesn't make sense. And then that's what happened that night where I'd done that. So I can't, still can't, I can understand what led me to that and why I was pushed to that point, but I had to again forgive myself for doing what I did. I'm still going through that process now. Um, so I am in the healing mode now. So this was almost a year ago. What happened was is I spent well a week after this incident where I crashed my car. Um, I failed, which I'm very grateful that it was failed because I'm still here, and I have this opportunity now to um, make good, and make things right and heal and turn it all around, because it doesn't make any sense to hurt yourself because other people hurt you. So the very fact that my attempt failed is the luckiest thing for me. So I'm still dealing with the ramifications because of that. But what it's actually done for me is put me on this path of um, really focusing on healing and getting into living again. And in a lot of ways, I'm free from a lot of the trauma because I've created my own trauma. So I'm able to deal with my own regrets and pain that I've brought upon myself. And while I'm doing that, I'm not focusing on the things from the past. And through understanding that what I've done is wrong and I have to fix that and atone for that in myself. Um, I'm very fortunate that I'm able to do that and exist now. So I've got the list of things to talk about here, and I've gone through most of it. So what happened was, about a week after that, um, I crashed my car trying to end my own life. I was in hospital, so I was put in a mental ward for 2 weeks, and that was a horrific experience. I understand why they do that, and um, I feel like I was stable when that happened. Um, and I'm not going to go into any details about the actual experience itself, um, but it was very traumatic, and I didn't get a chance to actually process what I'd just done for a long time afterwards. So I was put on medication, which I had no choice in the matter. Um, and the medication caused me great harm. So I will go into some detail about that. But um, I made such good progress since that I was able to get off the medication. So I was able to minimize the damage that, because it's such. I don't want to talk about the medications and stuff, but this was not nice to experience, and it did a lot of damaging things to my body and my mind. And I do understand why these things are prescribed and forced on people. Um, Unfortunately, I think that I had stabilized, and that there was no real need for me to be put on this, but I had no choice in the matter. So it meant that I had the trauma of being in the mental ward, which was not so bad compared to the medication. The medication was much worse. Luckily, I was only on it for a few months, and I was stable enough to be able to come off it. And I can tell you, I haven't had one thought about hurting myself or ending my own life since. And it's not because of the medication; it's because of myself. I'd gone through hell and come back, and I wanted to live. And I knew that it was going to be a difficult journey for me, because because what I'd done, it's the worst thing you can do to yourself, and I did that, and I have to. I'm still living with this now, as far as it's hasn't yet been 1 year, but I can tell you what I've gone through in this 1 year is that I've grown so much as a person, whereas I've been able to come to terms with a lot of things, and I was also lucky that I've had support with people around me, which has really helped. So all of this is because of unresolved trauma and my inability to deal with perceived situations. So um, it's something that I'm going to take a long time for me to get through. Um, I'm looking to the future. So where I'm at now is that I've recovered from so many so many things in this last year, and I have gone through a difficult time, and I'm so fortunate that things turned out the way they did in a lot of ways because I'm here now talking. But I'm also got to focus on the future where I want to take my opportunity and the chance that I have here and now and make something of it, and um, not just heal from what I did to myself, but actually fix the underlying problem, which is the unresolved trauma and how it, because it kept coming back, it did so much damage to me throughout my whole life, especially my adult life. It 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 came back to me, and I was re-traumatized when I was in a vulnerable state, and I couldn't deal with it. And I didn't reach out to the right people during that time, and it resulted in me having my whole life fall apart. And the reason why I'm talking about all this stuff is because this is something that's very common for people with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is that um, they go through all of these things, and it just happens to be that these are the things that I've gone through, and it resulted in um, potentially life-ending scenarios. And I I now I have a clearer vision of what I was going through now that I've had time to think about it. It's if if it wasn't for having enough people around me supporting me, I would be in a much worse state. So I'm very fortunate. So um, one of the my mother got sick um, a couple of months after I was out of hospital, and so that gave me a purpose to look after her. So I don't have to do a lot really, but um, what I need to do for her is enough for me to have something that gives me purpose. And that's given me the strength now because things are getting tougher for her. So I am now prepared and have come to terms with this situation. So for me, the biggest thing is if I can process more of my own trauma and then move on and heal from it. And if my mother can actually know that I'm going to be okay, that that means a lot to me because I was struggling for so long, and if I hadn't gone through all of this stuff, I wouldn't be here at this point now. So I'm fortunate to be able to be here for her now, and I'm ready for what's coming next with that. And I'm looking to the future. So I want to actually study and get some qualifications so that I can then get a job um, somehow helping people. And I've been doing a lot of research into how I can go about that. And it's going to take me, a year and a half to do the course and then maybe a year to find work. But then I'll have stable employment, I believe, and also in a position where I'm actually, hopefully, being able to help people. So for me, that's life changing. I don't want to make money. I just want to have some form of work that I can um, get um, get returns from emotionally, knowing that um, it's contributing, but also helping people because I've never really worked specifically in that role in my life. I've had lots of different jobs, but I've never had a career. Um, and this could actually become a career, or it could be something that I do for the rest of my life. And so I'm fortunate that I've come to this conclusion. I have a goal for the future. I have many goals. The first one is to continue my journey on healing from complex trauma, and that involves a lot of work and a lot of reading and a lot of investing in myself, and that includes continuing what I've already been doing, which is going for walks and watching the sunset and um, playing guitar, helping my mother in a caring role. That's something that's given me a purpose right now. And like I said, it hasn't been it was difficult for a few months, and then it got um, quite easy to do, and now it's starting to come to the time where I'm going to be needed more. So that's what I've got to deal with for the next few months to 6 months, maybe longer. But I have a goal now to actually start a new path in life, and I can take my experiences and I can actually um, learn. I've learned from having failed at things, and I've learned from going through hell type um, type of thing, and I've survived it. And so now focused on doing what I can moving forward. So I really hope I haven't been too much for anyone who's listening to this. But this is my story of how unresolved trauma um, sets you on a path of self destruction if you let it, or if you end up in that state without meaning to. But there is a way out, and I'm fortunate that I was able to find a way. I survived, and then from surviving, now I've got a chance to actually do something with it. And I'm got a long way to go on this journey, and I'm I'm really fortunate. So, I really hope that this hasn't been too heavy. I've been talking some heavy stuff, so there hasn't been many comments tonight. Um, but we got some hellos and good mornings. Hello, Yamina. Thanks for watching. I'm just about to close the live stream. I think I've gone through everything tonight, but feel free to watch it from the beginning. But like I did put in the title, it's content warning. I'm talking about some heavy topics tonight and my own personal experience with it. So there is a positive outcome to all this. Is that thank you so much. I'm so glad that I started doing this, reaching out, and I've been overwhelmed with the love and from everyone, and it means so much to me because I really need as much courage and help and endorsement right now. My life's about to get difficult, and um, I think I'm prepared for it, and I'm also looking to the future now, and I'm wanting to take what I know about things, and now I'll talk about my mental state now. Is that I I I've had such a recovery from um, the complex trauma in the last 6 months to the point where I'm able to talk now, and it can only get better now. It might get difficult again, but I don't think it's ever going to go back to where it was. So um, I'm so optimistic for the future, and I think that from the more I read about and hear about people's stories, is that you can heal and you can rebuild your life and you can have a functioning, loving life. And it does require a lot of work, and it requires a lot of from what I understand is self-educating or educating through from learning from experts and people who have gone through it themselves, and trying what works for you, because there's so many things that you can do to improve your life. So finding things that are feasible, that you can actually do, and also things that you like to do. And sometimes you have to include things you don't enjoy doing because they still have a beneficial effect. And that's something that you forget about, or it's easy for me to forget about, is I'll do A, B, and C, but I won't do all of it because um, it's all it you get to a point where it's just too much. So don't try to do everything. Just um, see what works and keep it up. Build a fitness around it and keep the momentum going. And um, things will get better and better and better. It won't magically become awesome tomorrow or any set day. It will get better. Thank you, Yamina. That's exactly it. We're here for each other. That's the main point, isn't it? You know, I've always tried to help others, but I've also had this thing where I've been so absorbed in my own world dealing with things that I haven't also helped myself, and that's so we got to remember that. Um, in order, I I'm at a point where I want to help people, so I have to actually make sure that I'm um, physically and mentally capable on doing these things and continuing them. And I'm really excited that I've come to the conclusion that I've got to do these things, and it's going to take me time, but eventually I'll be in a position where I can make it my life to do this. Um, I wish that I was able to not go through this stuff. I wish there was someone there that was able to stop me from getting to that point, but there wasn't. And I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm really glad I'm here now. And there are ways to improve your life and to heal from complex trauma. So I'm, I apologize for having to talk about this series of events that I went through. Because they are not nice things to hear about, but at least there is a happy, positive result is that I'm still here and I'm healthy and I've got a I've got a clear goal for the future and I've got support from people around me, just like these people watching tonight and have been so far in my live streams. So I'll try and keep them up and I'll try and talk about different topics. So um, it'll be in the title what I'm going to talk about, but I'll try and keep it um, very much free flowing conversation, and I'll include comments that come through on live chat. Like tonight, I just had a list which was basically in the description um, the main topics that I was going to talk about, so that I covered them all in the right order as well. So much love to everyone. Thank you so much for all your support, and um, I'm just going to keep improving my life and doing what I can for others around me and working on this healing journey, which is something that we can all do. We just got to find what works for ourselves, but um, do the research and um, explore the alternative methods, all the methods, and see what works for you. And if something doesn't work, there's so many different ways. You know, for instance, mindfulness, I had troubles for a while with it because I couldn't concentrate enough to actually go through the steps. with different mindfulness techniques, and I would give up on them. But I'm having a lot of success with it now because I've revisited some techniques and they're really working for me. So now I'm excited to learn new mindfulness techniques. So, you know, you can sort of give up on it something for a while, but don't be afraid to go back to it later. Anyway, I'm going to end the stream now, but thanks for everyone for watching, and I really appreciate you all. And hope you're well and have a good night. Thank you.